What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of It's a Blast podcast. My name's Mike, also known as the UD Happy Captain on X. Today, I'm sitting down with Tyler Butterworth, a creator on social media who's telling his Army story. Let's get started. Welcome to the It's a Blast podcast. My name is Mike. Here, I talk to members of the veteran and military community about their leadership style and how the military has affected their lives. Let's get started. What is going on? I am sitting down with Tyler Butterworth, a Sergeant First Class in the National Guard who has quite a social media following, 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, 1.9 million on Instagram, and 1.7 on TikTok. He has told his Army story. He talks about his kids and his family and his farm life. And I have him to talk to you for about the next 30 minutes to an hour. Brother, what is going on? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, of course. So, I've been following the content that you produce for quite a while on Instagram. You've done a great job at highlighting your time in the Army and doing it in a way that is funny, right? I mean, like, I literally watch your stuff and I wind up cracking up, right? But, I think there's stuff to talk about, like, your journey in the Army. You were in Iraq during the surge, so I want to talk about all that stuff. But let's start at the beginning. Why the Army? Why did you join?
So I knew I was going to do the military. I knew it was just, I come from a military family. My dad was in the Navy. My older brother joined the Army National Guard as well. He's 3 years older than me. So he joined, a couple weeks before graduating high school. I actually got a scholarship for swimming. And then I started going to all the recruiting offices. I went to literally all of them, which is something that when I was a recruiter, I preached, talk to all the branches before you decide on one. And I settled on the Army National Guard because it was the only branch that the recruiter could tell me, and probably shouldn't with OPSEC, but he was the only one that was able to tell me, like, hey, you're going to deploy as soon as you're done with your training. And that's what I wanted to do. I honestly could have cared less about the education benefits or cash incentives or any of that kind of stuff at the time. I was more focused on going to get the bad guys, what I wanted to do. So, walked into the recruiting office with the National Guard. He told me that. I took the ASVAB. I got a decent score, and he popped in a bunch of DVDs or VHSs, whatever they were way back then. And, I think we watched like Engineer and Medic and stuff like that. And then it got to infantry, and the opening scene of that one was some super muscular dude shooting I think it was probably an M60, shooting an M60 from the hip. And then he throws a hand grenade through a third story building window, and it blows the whole building up. And I'm like, dang, me being the 18-year-old, I'm like, you're telling me we can do that? And he's like, yeah. And hook, line, and sinker, done deal. 11 Bravo infantry is what I did.
Dude, I mean, I wish. So I came in on an 18 X-ray contract, right? So
Gotcha.
A lot like you, my dad was in, both my brothers were in at the time, and my brother, right after 9/11 happened, signed an 18 X-ray contract. So I was like,
Nice.
if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Turns out that wasn't true, right? And I failed out at selection, but I tried, right? That's the important part. But I remember like all the cool guy, fast roping out of helicopters and helo casting into the water, and, him telling his story and coming back at holiday time, and me being like, that's the coolest stuff in the world. I want to do that. And, I wound up going EOD through happenstance, which it worked out pretty well for me. I think it's a career field that I absolutely love, but you got to do that, right? I mean, you got to go deploy and fight bad guys. I mean, you were a turret gunner in 2009, correct?
It was 07, 08.
07, 08.
Yeah, so in infantry school, I actually got to shake the President Bush at the time. I got to shake his hand. He came down there to Fort Benning at the time to announce the troop surge into Iraq to help with Ramadi and the surge and all that. So I shook his hand, and then probably a month later, I was in my train up in Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and then we were in that exact area that President Bush had told us about.
How was that?
So we were in the Anbar province. We were at Al Assad Air Base, which is still around, and it's changed a lot. But we had a decent experience. We did convoy security mainly, but we'd we were all over the country. So we got to see a lot of the country. We were exposed to some of the bad things, but we were pretty fortunate for the most part.
Yeah. So you came back from deployment. So you're in the Guard, right? So you
Yep.
have the opportunity to do civilian employment. You became a cop when you came back, correct?
Um, Not quite yet. So that was my first deployment in '07, '08. When I got home from that, I bought a house and went to community college and worked a job as a security guard because I can't sit still and I like to do a million things at once. So renovated that house while I was on terminal leave from that deployment. Started doing the security guard thing, and then I volunteered for another deployment in, I think, '09. I went back on active orders with the Guard as a training NCO. I think it was a E4 promotable, E5. And then I volunteered with our Cav squadron here to go on another deployment back to Iraq, but this time to Baghdad and Sadr City is where we were.
There's some heavy spots that you were at in Iraq at some heavy times, you know.
Yeah.
What was, over 100 combat missions that you ran, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What was that like? I mean, as far as when we talk about, you wanted to be a soldier, you wanted to be an infantryman. Was it what you wanted it to be? I mean, those are some heavy times. Those are some hard times. I did Afghanistan twice.
Yeah.
How was that for you, those deployments?
I mean, the first one, so I was 18. All my other friends were going to frat parties and getting drunk and doing all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
I was not. I was doing the opposite. I don't know. It made me extremely grateful for everything that I have and even had at that time. As an 18-year-old, like living in my parents' basement, like it just really kind of put that home. I mean, and it showed me what true friendship is. It showed me what, brothers are, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I still talk to those dudes today, 18 years later. So I don't know. There were times where it was like, man, this is awful. Like, this is terrible. These are terrible things. These are terrible things that we see, that I'm seeing or experiencing. But ultimately, it made me who I am today, and I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything. I mean, I was very grateful for the EOD guys. I will tell you that.
Nice, the EOD plug. I mean, I get it, man. I agree, right? So some of the stuff from deployments, the stuff that you have to experience, the stuff that you have to live through, the stuff that you see, like it can be absolutely terrible. But you seem like a really happy dude. I would like to think that I am also a really happy dude as well, like family oriented as well. And I really think that a huge part of it comes from, you did the surge in Iraq, I did the surge in Afghanistan, right? It was hard. It was, quite frankly, it was really shitty a lot of the times. Having said that, just what you said, right? The people that I met on that deployment are people that I still talk to 14 years later, right? They're still the people that we get together, have a drink, tell stories, right? They're still involved in my family life. Like, the wildest thing for me is when I was an E4 on that deployment, my team leader was an E6. So EOD team leader, a little bit different than infantry land, right? A squad leader equivalent, E6. And it was like 3 years ago, we were hanging out again, and I was watching my kid, who was 3, and his kid, who was 3, playing with each other. And I was just like, it's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's awesome being able to keep those relationships going because of the experiences that you both shared. I was down at filming content with my normal job in the Army now, but I was down at, where was I? Georgia, Fort Benning. I'm like blanking on the name of it right now.
Oh, Fort Moore.
Fort Moore. There it is. Thank you.
We had to change all the names. Fort Moore.
Yeah. So I was down there at Fort Moore. We were filming Best Ranger and that kind of thing for some of the National Guard participants that we had. And I just, out of nowhere, my lieutenant, my platoon leader that I had on my first deployment, he then became my company commander on my second deployment. And I probably hadn't talked to him for at least a year since I was down there, but I knew that he was from Alabama. So I was getting ready to go somewhere and I just shot him a text. I was like, "Hey man, I'm down here in Fort Moore. I'm not far from, where I think you used to live. If you want to get dinner or whatever, hit me up." He called me back within like maybe 5 minutes. And he's like, "Dude, let's meet tonight. I will drive halfway. You drive halfway." And so I met him, first time seeing him since 2012. So what's that, 12 years? But the minute we saw each other, we big hug and everything, but it was like, we're right back to it. Like always, we've been decent friends and everything. And it's crazy how that can continue.
Yeah, I mean, the relationships, I think, in the Army is one of the things that, when we talk about why should people join the military, right? We talk so much about benefits and we talk about bonuses and we talk about skills and trades. But the one thing that I don't think the Army capitalizes on enough is those friendships, right? And whether we want to call it
Yeah.
trauma bonding or whatever the case may be, like the best friends that I have ever made in my life have been in the military. And the community is just so small that it's like you bump into these people again and again and again. I bumped into my drill sergeant at Fort Campbell,
That's
right?
crazy.
And it was absolutely terrifying, right? Because I was getting my haircut and I'm like staring across the room
Yep.
and the other barber. I'm like, I know that dude. And I'm an E6 at this point, right? And
Yep.
like went up and talked to him. I was all terrified still, but it turned out to be a great conversation. But the
Yeah.
Army should really be capitalizing on that aspect, right? Which is these are the best friends, I think I will ever have. People that, I know if life goes sideways, they'll take care of me and my family.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's talk about, so you did have a civilian job, right? You were a cop prior to becoming National Guard, right? Like prior to becoming full-time National Guard.
Yeah. So while I was in Iraq on my second deployment, one of my buddies that was in my platoon, he was telling me about being a cop. Throughout high school, I was a volunteer firefighter, EMT. So I was like, all right, I've done the military thing, I've done the firefighter thing. So he's telling me how cool it is to be a cop. So I'm like, screw it, I haven't done that. I'll try that out. So I got home from Iraq in 2012. I applied to the police department in the DC metro area and I got hired. I was a patrol officer for about 3 years. I was a gang detective for a couple years after that. And then I was a street crimes, like narcotics, firearms, prostitution, that kind of thing, detective after that.
How, like, okay, so, I've obviously spent a lot of time watching you on social media. I'm sure people that are watching this interview have watched you on social media. How do you remain so positive, man? I mean, like you're an infantryman during the surge, right? You're narcotics, prostitution, gangs. I mean, like how do you maintain such a positive attitude, right, when you've just seen so much bad in the world?
I mean, for me, it's always been that, if what I'm doing, especially now, like with the videos and the social media stuff, like I'm constantly get messages about, how these videos make people feel or how it makes them happy. So that for one is why I do it at this point. It's more than anything else. That's what it is. So, but as far as my attitude and how I remain positive, it's mainly because I think that my wife hates this, but it's mainly that I think it's a huge waste of time to be negative when it's not necessary. If if you're not thinking about the solution to a problem and you're just dwelling on the problem, you're probably never going to start to feel good about it. So I would rather use my energy to find a solution to a problem or a solution to why I'm unhappy than to just keep dwelling on it. Am I always like that? Am I ever unhappy? Of course. That would be weird if I was, hey, all the time. But yeah, I mean, I really don't let things bother me. If something bad happens or something bad happens to me or anything like that, it is what it is. That's life. I'm going to work through it and I'm going to try to be as positive as I can. I mean, I've had plenty of people in my life that were good examples of that. They're going through a hard time or whatever it is. They're always going to have a good attitude and not spend their whole time complaining and all that, because that affects everyone. So that's kind of how I do it, I guess.
No, I mean, it's the way to be, right? I mean, I think those are the leaders that, as I was growing up in the Army, those are the people that I aspire to be. Because, when people watch movies or TV shows where there's, the NCO, the sergeant who's just yelling and barking at them, like reality is like a lot of times that's not how it actually is. There are those people, without a doubt, those people exist. But those aren't the people that people look up to and want to emulate. I go back to this guy a lot. My first DoD team leader, but like the man had a switch, right? It's like we'd be in the truck, kind of just laughing, joking, smoking, right? And then we get a call like, hey, there's an ID, and like a switch. I mean, just go into 100% like professional, job driven, doing his job. And then as soon as it was all clear, it was like right back to it. And I remember,
that's awesome.
I remember being like, that's what I want to be. Like, that's the type of leader that I want to be. I've had company commanders, battalion commanders, brigade commanders that, just that calm, cool, collected, like, hey, let's get through this. Let's talk about your transition over into full-time National Guard, right? So that's what you're doing currently. Can you tell me what you're doing?
Yeah, so what I'm doing now is I'm the social media non-commissioned officer in charge for the Army National Guard. So I am the final approval authority on what we put out for the Army National Guard. Any kind of digital advertising, multimedia, that's kind of my bread and butter. I also am the creative director, so I come up with a lot of the creative ideas that we're doing for recruiting purposes now.
And these are, to be clear, these are Army specific. These aren't like the stuff that you're posting on,
No. So
this is like very...
Yeah, it's totally separate. So everything that I post on my personal Instagram channel, which has always been my personal Instagram and social media channels, which is the @Butterworth the syrup. That one is my personal stuff. My roommates. So that's my personal one. The one that I supervise and I do for work is the official Army National Guard social media pages.
Nice. What do you think? I mean, what is the benefit to social media when it comes to the Army, the National Guard, and recruitment?
So I think that if we go back to I went from being a cop to being a recruiter for the Army National Guard first before I got this position. So I learned very quickly that going to a high school and doing lunchroom displays as recruiters and everything, while that's effective, it can be more effective if you couple it with the communication tool that these kids are using. The tool that they're not using is text messages and phone calls or email addresses, which is at that time what the Army was very heavily teaching to new recruiters. So I learned firsthand for myself. I went to one of these schools, one of the 18 high schools that I had to go to, and I asked some kid what his Facebook was, and he like laughed in my face and said, "My mom has Facebook." And I'm like, "Okay, thanks, dude." So I asked him what he had, and he told me a little bit more about it, and I learned what Instagram was as a result of that. And then I kind of went down the rabbit hole of figuring out what these content things are that they do, what a reel is, how to make a video with your cell phone, and all this kind of stuff. And that's what kind of led me to starting my own personal Instagram, because I'm like, hey, this could help connect with a lot of people. But in terms of the Army using it, I think that it's huge that the Army uses it. I think that if this is the way that a huge audience that we're trying to recruit is communicating and sharing information with each other, wouldn't it make sense for us to use that as the primary method of trying to recruit them?
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense. I will tell you that one of my, favorite things from having a personal social media account where I talk about the military is those messages that I get where people say, hey, I had no idea that you guys were involved in X, Y, and Z. I think people get to see, I think they go hand in hand, right? I think they go hand in hand, the professional department of the Army. Hey, what's up? How are you?
Can you say hi? Can you say hi? Say hi.
You're a celebrity. You know that?
She is, yeah.
I have watched your videos.
She said bye.
Oh, man. Do you care if I keep that in?
Yeah, of course, man.
Yeah, man. But I think they go hand in hand. I think the professional social media from the military goes hand in hand with all these creators who are creating personal content. And I say that because we get to see all the cool stuff, in the 30-second, 15-second, video clips that the Army puts out, right? But the stories behind the scenes, that's the stuff where you have content creators that are telling those stories that are in the military. The number of messages I get where people are like, hey, I had no idea that, and I'll speak EOD centric, that's what I am, but like, I had no idea EOD did this, that EOD supports the Secret Service and they provide presidential support. Hey man, that's super cool. You guys put on suits and ties and you go do that stuff. I had no idea that, we still have people in Kosovo that are doing a UXO mission, right? Like, those are the stories that people go looking for. And I think the next generation, like, what they do is they see something and then they start digging into it, doing their own research, right? And if those content creators don't exist in those fields, then it's kind of a brick wall for them.
Right. Yeah. Where are they going to get that information from?
What has the reception been from the Army, if any, with you being a content creator on your personal time as well?
So I've had a good experience. I really can't say anything bad about the Army since I've been in for 18 years now. I mean, I had some not the best experiences? Yeah, of course you could say that about any job, but I mean, the Army's been good to me. I really have nothing to complain about with the Army. As far as social media goes, I've been very fortunate with that as well. I was invited to the AUSA last year, a part of the Solarium, and I actually got to brief the Secretary of the Army and the top three on how we could better use social media for recruiting purposes. So they've kind of leaned into it. I think they're on the right track with their social media and how we can better use it to recruit. And even to the National Guard, in my current position, I think that it was a huge win for me personally, but also for the Army National Guard to be able to do this role.
So what's next, man? I mean, what is next for, social media in the Army from the National Guard perspective? Are you guys trying to highlight, specific jobs and MOSs? Are you trying to, highlight benefits? Is it everything? Can you kind of share what the strategy looks like if you can?
Yeah, so there's actually a huge strategy involved with all this kind of stuff when it comes to marketing, advertising, social media, all the search engine optimization and all that kind of stuff that we do on the marketing side. But for me personally, in my role, my goal is always going to be to better feature our own people. And if that means that we use Army people to tell that story, then that's what I will always push. I would rather have that over somebody else making the content or featuring a celebrity or somebody to tell what the Army is about. I don't want to hear it from them. I want to hear it from our soldiers. I want to hear their personal experiences, the friendships they've made, the things that they've done. Do we need to highlight the MOSs and those specific things? Of course we do. We need to educate people on everything that you can do in the Army. But I would rather hear it from those soldiers doing their job in the field while they're doing it. And so that's a huge push for what we're doing next year and the years to come.
No, that's awesome, man. I do have a question. What is it like being an infantryman with a mustache?
I get that a lot, but maybe it's a National Guard thing. I haven't had a problem. And full disclosure, I've only had a mustache since this whole social media thing. I started growing it because I started watching Parks and Rec, and I did a Ron Swanson skit. And ever since then, I think I shaved it off after doing a couple of those videos, and it like lit the internet on fire. They were up in arms that I had shaved my mustache. So as soon as I grew it back, the followers kept going up. So
that's the secret. Look, I think if I started growing a mustache, the followers would go down drastically. Like for me, I can't grow the middle. So like when I do it within Army regs, I get like a little dirt here and a little dirt here. And it's the joke between my wife and I is like, I will get out of the Army when I can grow a beard. And it's been 16 years. It's not looking good for me, man. So, hey, dude, I want to say thank you for taking the time to sit down, tell your story, talk about what is coming up next with the National Guard and social media. I have to do the shameless plug. Is there any plan to do EOD videos? And if so, how can I get involved and help you out?
So actually that is on our agenda for the Army National Guard. We are trying to film EOD related recruiting videos in the next 6 months. So I am all about it. Send me an official email and and let's do it. I'm serious. I mean, we can make it happen.
I will do that. I will also probably CC a bunch of people that can actually make those decisions, not me. But hey, man.
There you go.
Hey, thank you so much for taking the time, tell your story, man. I greatly appreciate it. I'm super excited to keep following you on social media and watch the content you're producing, and seeing how your kids are involved as well, because it's pretty awesome, man. That is a whole family event, dude. Thank you so much for what you do and for what you continue to do.
Of course, thank you as well.